JD Vance shut down a liberal reporter on live TV, but what happened next sparked a nationwide firestorm. The stage was set. Bright lights, cameras rolling, and a packed auditorium filled with anticipation. JD Vance sat on one side of the long, polished debate table, his expression unreadable. Across from him, renowned political journalist Lisa Carter adjusted the microphone clip to her blazer. She was sharp, experienced, and known for pressing her guests until they cracked. The topic of the night? Government spending, entitlement programs, and the growing debate over the role of federal aid in everyday American lives. The network had been hyping this debate for weeks, branding it as a must-watch event between the hard-hitting journalist and the conservative firebrand. The moderator, an older gentleman with neatly combed gray hair, cleared his throat. "Let's begin." Lisa wasted no time. Leaning forward slightly, she glanced down at her notes before locking eyes with Vance. "Senator Vance, you've repeatedly opposed increased federal spending on welfare programs, claiming they promote dependency rather than opportunity. But in a country where millions struggle to make ends meet, don't you think your stance is not just impractical, but also heartless?" There it was, the first punch. A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Vance didn't blink. He sat back, hands folded on the table. "Lisa, I think the real question is, why do we keep throwing billions into programs that aren't lifting people out of poverty?" He paused just long enough to let the point land. The government should be in the business of creating opportunities, not trapping people in cycles of reliance. Lisa wasn't fazed. She knew how this worked. "And yet," she countered, flipping to another page in her notes, "you yourself grew up in a struggling household. Your own memoir details the hardships your family faced. Some might say you benefited from government programs. So why push policies that make it harder for others to do the same?" A low hum of agreement stirred in parts of the audience. She had him, didn't she? That was the angle. Make it personal. Make him answer not as a senator, but as the kid from a broken home. Vance exhaled, tilting his head slightly. "Lisa, I know what it means to struggle, but I also know what got me out of that situation. It wasn't a government check." He leaned in, his voice steady. "It was family. It was discipline. It was mentors who pushed me to be better. And I'll tell you what's heartless, leading people to believe that if Washington doesn't save them, they have no future." The air tightened. The audience wasn't sure if they should clap or keep silent. Lisa's lips pressed together for a brief moment before she spoke again. "So you're saying the government has no responsibility to help those in need?" Vance shook his head. "Not at all. I'm saying it has a responsibility to do it effectively. We've spent decades funneling money into programs that haven't moved the needle. We don't need bigger government. We need better government." Lisa pursed her lips. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she wasn't done. But the real moment that would change everything hadn't happened yet. That was still coming. Lisa didn't miss a beat. She straightened in her chair, flipping another page in her notes with calculated precision. "Senator Vance, let's talk numbers. Under your proposals, funding for federal assistance programs would be reduced by billions over the next decade. Do you really expect struggling families, single mothers, underpaid workers, disabled veterans, to just figure it out without that safety net?" There was a bite to her words. The audience picked up on it. A few heads nodded in agreement. Others leaned forward, waiting for Vance's reply. Vance didn't flinch. "Lisa, I expect the government to stop treating people like statistics and start treating them like human beings." His voice was measured but firm. "What we have now isn't a safety net. It's a trap, and the proof is in the numbers. Despite trillions in spending, poverty rates haven't budged in any meaningful way. What does that tell you?" Lisa narrowed her eyes. "It tells me we need to invest more, not less. Cutting assistance while corporate tax breaks continue, that's not reform, Senator. That's choosing winners and losers." A few quiet claps rippled through the crowd. Vance's jaw tightened slightly, but he stayed composed. "You know what's interesting, Lisa? Every time someone suggests reforming these programs, the media paints it as some cruel, heartless move. But let's talk about reality. How many success stories have you heard coming out of these systems? How many people actually make it out? Lisa opened her mouth, but Vance didn't give her the chance. I'll tell you, not many, because the system isn't designed to help them get out. It's designed to keep them in. The audience was fully engaged now. Some nodded, others murmured in disagreement. Lisa exhaled sharply. So your solution is to take away what little help they have? Vance shook his head. No. My solution is to give them something better. Real opportunities. Education. Jobs that pay a living wage. Support systems that actually push them toward self-sufficiency instead of keeping them dependent. Lisa let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. Senator, that sounds great in theory. But tell that to a mother of 3 working 2 jobs and still barely covering rent. She can't afford to wait for better opportunities. She needs help now. A small wave of applause broke out. Lisa had made her point, the moral argument. But Vance wasn't backing down. He leaned in slightly. Lisa, what she needs is a system that doesn't force her to rely on that help forever. We should be asking why someone working 2 jobs still can't afford rent, not just throwing more money at the problem and pretending we fixed it. Lisa's fingers curled around the edge of her notepad. The frustration was creeping in. She was used to controlling the conversation, guiding the narrative, but Vance wasn't playing along. Still, she had one more card to play. If that's the case, Senator, why is it that the states with the highest poverty rates tend to be Republican-led? If your policies work so well, why aren't they working there? The crowd reacted immediately. Some gasped, others applauded. It was a bold move, a direct challenge. Vance's expression didn't change. He took a slow breath. Lisa, if you're going to bring up statistics, let's be honest about them. Many of those states have had high poverty rates for decades, long before conservatives had a say. The real question is, what's been keeping them that way? Lisa opened her mouth, but Vance was quicker. You see, we can debate policy all night, but what people care about is results. And if what we've been doing for the last 50 years was working, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. Another murmur from the audience. Lisa shifted in her seat. But things were about to take an even sharper turn, and neither of them saw it coming. For the first time that evening, Lisa hesitated. It was slight, just a flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. But the cameras caught it. The audience saw it. Vance noticed too, and he went in for the kill. I'll tell you what's happening, Lisa. The same people who claim to fight for the underprivileged are the ones keeping them exactly where they are, and they do it because a dependent voter is a reliable voter. The room tensed. A few scattered claps, then silence. Even the moderator looked slightly uncomfortable. Lisa forced a smile, but her grip on the pen in her hand tightened. Senator, that's a bold accusation. Are you suggesting that government programs are intentionally designed to keep people in poverty? Vance didn't miss a beat. Not intentionally, just conveniently. That did it. The crowd reacted. Gasps, whispers, some murmured agreement. Lisa pressed her lips together, taking a deep breath. She had to regain control. She squared her shoulders, shaking off whatever momentary doubt had crept in. Senator, let's pivot for a moment. Since you're so concerned about dependency, let's talk about the corporations that benefit from government handouts. Tax loopholes, subsidies. Why is it that when the working class receives assistance, it's called a handout, but when billion-dollar companies do, it's called an incentive? The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, even a few whistles. Lisa had found her counterattack. Vance nodded slowly, as if considering her words. That's a fair question. He paused, letting the moment stretch just long enough. And I'll tell you, I'm just as disgusted by corporate welfare as I am by government failure. But let's not pretend they're the same thing. A corporation getting a tax break isn't the reason a single mother can't pay rent. The real issue is why the cost of living keeps rising while wages stay stagnant. You want to talk about that? The applause from Lisa's remark faded. The audience wasn't sure whether to cheer or stay quiet. Lisa, however, wasn't done. Fine, let's talk wages. You voted against increasing the federal minimum wage. If you care so much about people getting ahead, Why not support a livable wage? Vance exhaled through his nose. Because forcing businesses to pay more doesn't magically make the economy better. It makes things more expensive. You raise wages, businesses raise prices. That single mother you mentioned? Now her groceries, rent, and gas all cost more, and she's right back where she started. Lisa leaned forward, shaking her head. So what's your solution, Senator? Just tell people to work harder? Vance didn't blink. No, my solution is to fix the system before we slap on Band-Aid policies that make it worse. A few heads nodded in agreement, others looked skeptical, but Lisa had another play. Senator, let's be honest. The real reason you oppose these policies isn't economics, it's politics. Conservatives love the idea of self-reliance because it lets them ignore the people who are actually struggling. That landed. Some in the audience even cheered. Vance let the noise settle before responding. Lisa, I grew up in poverty. I know exactly what struggling looks like. And I'll tell you what I learned. No politician, no government check, no policy was ever going to save me. The only way out was through personal responsibility and real opportunities. Lisa folded her arms. And what about the people who don't have those opportunities? Vance leaned back, arms resting on the chair. Then let's create them, instead of keeping them dependent on a system that's failed them for generations. Silence. Lisa shifted again, glancing at her notes, as if searching for her next move. But the tension in the air was different now. She had challenged him. He had answered. But what happened next would turn this debate from a policy discussion into a national controversy. The debate should have ended there. The moderator cleared his throat, signaling for the next question, but the energy in the room had shifted. The usual rhythm of back-and-forth arguments was gone. Instead, there was an unmistakable tension, a sense that something had cracked beneath the surface. Lisa adjusted her blazer, her fingers momentarily tightening at the cuffs. She wasn't just debating anymore. She was fighting to regain control. She forced a tight smile. Well, Senator, I'm sure the millions of Americans struggling to make ends meet will be relieved to know that their biggest obstacle isn't rising costs or stagnant wages, but their own lack of personal responsibility. It was a sarcastic jab, designed to get the audience back on her side. And it worked. Laughter and applause rippled through the room. A few audience members even whistled. Vance, however, didn't take the bait. He simply waited. Let the noise die down. Then, with measured calm, he leaned in slightly. Lisa, I get it. You have to frame it that way. That's what keeps the narrative going. The laughter faded. Vance's tone was steady, but his words hit like a hammer. Because if people start believing they have the power to change their own lives, if they stop looking to politicians and journalists to tell them what they should think, what they should feel, then what happens to people like you? Silence. Lisa's jaw tightened. It was subtle, but enough. The cameras caught it. The audience felt it. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsettled. She parted her lips, ready to fire back, but no words came. The moderator cleared his throat again. All right, let's move on. But the damage was done. The energy in the room had completely shifted. The once boisterous audience was now uncertain, hesitant. People weren't cheering anymore. They were thinking, and that was what made the moment dangerous. Lisa exhaled, reaching for her water. Her hands trembled slightly as she took a sip. She had been in hundreds of debates, had faced some of the most challenging political figures in the country. But this time, something was different. Because this time, she wasn't in control of the narrative anymore. The debate ended shortly after. The moderator rushed through the remaining questions, both participants gave their closing remarks, and the cameras cut to commercial. On the surface, it seemed like just another televised political clash, but the real storm was about to begin, because within minutes, clips of the exchange started circulating online. The moment the cameras cut, Lisa removed her earpiece and muttered something under her breath. It wasn't meant for the audience. It wasn't meant for anyone to hear. But someone did. A production assistant, young, quick on their feet, and always recording everything, caught the moment on a phone tucked just out of frame. The footage wasn't polished, wasn't staged. It was raw. Lisa, believing she was off air, leaned toward a colleague and scoffed. "He got lucky. If the moderators weren't so useless, I could have buried him." She shook her head, rubbing her temples. "People are too dumb to see what he's doing. It doesn't matter, we'll clean it up." She sighed sharply, her frustration boiling over. "God, I hate having to act like I actually care what these people think." That was it. Just a few words spoken in frustration, but they were enough. Within an hour, the clip was online. At first, it was a small leak, circulated among media insiders, whispered about in private chats. Then someone posted it to a major political forum. Then Twitter. Then TikTok. By morning, it was everywhere. Lisa Carter, the journalist who prided herself on championing the working class, the woman who had just accused JD Vance of ignoring struggling Americans, was caught mocking them behind closed doors. The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded. Some viewers felt betrayed. People who had trusted her were now questioning if her entire persona was an act. Others doubled down, claiming the video was taken out of context, that she was just venting. But the damage was done. Her credibility wasn't just damaged, it was on trial. News outlets scrambled. Some refused to cover the leak at all. Others tried to spin it, focusing on how the clip was selectively edited. But no one could unsee what they saw. The words were clear. The expression on her face was unmistakable. Meanwhile, JD Vance stayed quiet. He didn't gloat, didn't issue a statement. He didn't have to. The internet was handling it for him. By the afternoon, Lisa Carter had locked her Twitter account. By the evening, her network issued a carefully worded statement about commitment to journalistic integrity. But it was too late. The debate had started as just another televised event, a routine political clash. Now it had become something much bigger. By the next morning, every major news cycle was fixated on one question. Had Lisa Carter just exposed what many had suspected all along? It wasn't just about one journalist's offhand comment anymore. It was about the trust, or the lack of it, between the media and the people they claimed to represent. Lisa had spent years positioning herself as an advocate for everyday Americans. But now, with one leaked clip, she had confirmed what many had felt but couldn't prove, that to some in the media, the audience was just a means to an end. And the backlash wasn't just coming from conservatives. Progressive viewers, her own audience, felt blindsided. The very people who had cheered her on the night before were now demanding explanations. Comment sections flooded with anger, disappointment, and disillusionment. One viral post read, "If Lisa Carter doesn't respect us behind closed doors, why should we trust her in front of the cameras?" That was the real damage. Not just a PR scandal, not just another internet outrage cycle. It was about credibility. Her network tried to do damage control. A public apology was released, generic, carefully crafted. Regretful words spoken in frustration. Does not reflect our commitment to truth, the usual. But the public wasn't buying it. People weren't just mad. They were watching closely now, and they were asking questions the media didn't want asked. How many others think this way behind closed doors? How much of what we see is real, and how much is just performance? If she hadn't been caught, would she have ever admitted it? Meanwhile, JD Vance remained silent. No tweets, no press conferences, no victory laps. He let the story tell itself. And that's what made it so powerful. Because the more Lisa and her network scrambled, the worse it got. The excuses, the shifting narratives, it all played into what people had already suspected. This wasn't just about one journalist's mistake. It was about the way politics and media actually worked. And for many Americans, this was the moment they realized, maybe, just maybe, they had been played for a long time. And that realization? That was bigger than any one debate. Lisa Carter would survive. The news cycle would eventually move on. Another scandal, another controversy, another story would replace this one. But something had changed. A seed had been planted in the minds of millions. The next time a journalist pushed a narrative, The next time a politician dodged a question, people would remember this moment. Because when the cameras were off, when the microphones were unplugged, when they thought no one was listening, what was really being said, and who could truly be trusted? One debate, one viral clip. And now nothing would be the same. If this story made you think, if it made you question, reconsider, or even see things differently, then you know how important it is to stay informed. Make sure you're getting the full story, not just the one you're being told. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because in today's world, knowing the truth isn't just important, it's everything.